Winston Churchill, one of the most iconic figures of the 20th century, was born on November 30, 1874, at Blenheim Palace. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a prominent politician, and his mother, Jenny Jerome, was an American socialite. Despite this privileged background, Winston's childhood wasn't as easy as one might think. Although he was spirited and energetic as a boy, but he wasn't particularly fond of school. He struggled academically and was often seen as a bit of a troublemaker. He attended several schools, but Harrow School was where he spent much of his youth. Although he didn't excel in most subjects, Winston found a love for history and literature, and he also developed a passion for reading. However, his early struggles in school led to a complicated relationship with his parents, particularly his father, who was often critical of Winston's performance. After Harrow, Winston went on to the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. This was a turning point for him because, unlike his earlier academic experiences, he did quite well there. He graduated near the top of his class, which set him on the path to a military career. His time at Sandhurst helped build the discipline and leadership skills that would later define his political and military life. Once he completed his training, Churchill was eager to see action. His first taste of military life came in 1895 when he was sent to Cuba as a war correspondent, reporting on the Spanish-Cuban conflict. This was his first experience with war, igniting his love for adventure and his desire to be at the center of important events. The stay in Cuba also exposed him to different cultures and ideas, something that would broaden his worldview. After Cuba, Churchill was posted to India, where he served as a young officer in the British Army. Stationed in Bangalore, India, he spent much of his free time reading and educating himself on various subjects, including philosophy, history, and politics. From India, Churchill was deployed to Sudan, where he took part in the Battle of Omdurman in 1898, a significant engagement in Britain's efforts to control the region. This event further fueled his desire to make a name for himself. He later wrote about his experiences in a book called The River War, showcasing his growing writing skills and deepening interest in military strategy. By the late 1890s, Churchill was eager to move beyond the military and into politics. In 1900, he was elected as a Conservative Member of Parliament, MP for Oldham. Churchill was only 25 then, but was already making waves with his speeches and ideas. Even though he started as a conservative, his views were more progressive than many in his party, particularly on issues like social reform. This eventually led to a split with the Conservatives, and in 1904, he crossed the floor to join the Liberal Party, where he felt his ideas would have a better chance of being realized. After Winston Churchill's early years as a young military officer and his election as a Conservative MP in 1900, his life took off in a series of political and personal twists that would shape the rest of his career. His move into politics wasn't without controversy or challenges, but Churchill was never one to shy away from bold decisions, and that showed as he continued to grow as a public figure. Now a liberal, Churchill's career took off. By 1908, he was appointed president of the Board of Trade, and soon after, he became Home Secretary. These positions gave him the chance to put his progressive ideas into action. He pushed for labor reforms, introduced unemployment insurance, and even supported the introduction of a minimum wage. This was when Churchill started to make his mark as a political reformer, working closely with his friend and fellow Liberal politician, David Lloyd George. In 1911, Churchill was appointed First Lord of the Admiralty, putting him in charge of the Royal Navy. He relished this position because it combined his passion for military strategy with his growing influence in government. In the years leading up to World War I, Churchill was heavily involved in modernizing the Navy, preparing it for the war that many felt was inevitable. He was forward-thinking in advocating for developing naval aviation and constructing more powerful ships, believing Britain's maritime power would be crucial in any significant conflict. However, the World War would prove to be challenging for Churchill. In 1915, he was deeply involved in planning one of the most controversial military campaigns of the war, the Gallipoli Campaign. As First Lord of the Admiralty, Churchill pushed hard for an ambitious plan to open a new front by attacking the Ottoman Empire through the Dardanelles Strait. He aimed to knock the Turks out of the war and open a sea route to Russia. It seemed like a bold strategic move at the time. But in true Churchill fashion, he didn't just sit back and accept defeat. After stepping down, he actually rejoined the army and went to the Western Front in France. He served as a battalion commander in the trenches, an experience that gave him a deep personal understanding of the horrors of war. This time on the front lines helped rebuild his sense of purpose and his standing with the public, as it showed his willingness to serve despite the political fallout. After World War I, Churchill gradually made his way back into the political fold. He re-entered government, first as Minister of Munitions, where he helped oversee Britain's transition from wartime to peacetime production. He also took on other key roles, including Colonial Secretary and Secretary of State for War. One of the more surprising twists in Churchill's journey through politics came in the 1920s when he decided to rejoin the Conservative Party, the same party he had left in 1904. Churchill had become increasingly uncomfortable with the direction the Liberal Party was taking, particularly its approach to the economy, and he felt more aligned with the Conservatives' new focus on fiscal responsibility. In 1924, he became Chancellor of the Exchequer, Britain's finance minister, a role in which he tried to stabilize the country's post-war economy. Even though his return to the Conservatives brought him back to prominence, Churchill's decision to return Britain to the gold standard in 1925, a policy that many economists believe worsened the economic situation, was heavily criticized. It was a reminder that despite his brilliance, Churchill's career had its share of missteps. When war broke out, Churchill was brought back into government as First Lord of the Admiralty, the same position he had held during World War I. In May 1940, when Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain resigned following his failed attempts to negotiate peace with Hitler, Churchill was asked to step in as Prime Minister. One of Churchill's greatest moments of leadership came during the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940. The German Luftwaffe launched a massive bombing campaign against Britain, hoping to weaken the country before a full invasion. Throughout the war, Churchill formed a close partnership with U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Together, they worked to ensure that the Allies would eventually defeat the Axis powers. By 1945, after 6 long years of fighting, World War II came to an end with the defeat of Nazi Germany and its allies. Churchill was hailed as a hero, not just in Britain but around the world. But despite all of his successes during the war, Churchill faced an unexpected twist after the war ended. In the general election of 1945, just a few months after victory in Europe, Churchill and his Conservative Party were defeated. The Labour Party, led by Clement Attlee, swept to power with a focus on rebuilding the country after the war, especially with promises of social reforms like the National Health Service. Churchill was disappointed but took the loss in stride. He remained in politics, serving as leader of the opposition, and continued to be an influential voice on the global stage. Like other prominent men that have walked the earth, Churchill had a family of his own. His wife, Clementine Hosier, whom he married in 1908, was the mother to his 5 children, Diana, Randolph, Sarah, Marigold, who sadly passed away as a child, and Mary. Clementine and Winston's relationship was said to be incredibly close. Through the highs and lows of his career, Clementine was always there to offer advice, support, and calm his nerves. She balanced out Winston's strong personality and kept him grounded. Their marriage lasted 56 years. But also outside of politics, Winston was a man of many passions. He loved to write and paint. His writing career was a major part of his life, and he actually won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953. Would you imagine that? A prime minister winning a Nobel Prize for writing? He penned volumes of history and memoirs, sharing his thoughts on politics, war, and life. And his paintings, well, that was his escape. Whenever things got too intense, especially during the war, he'd retreat to his easel and paint landscapes, finding peace in the act of creating art. After retiring, he spent his final years reflecting on his long, remarkable life. He passed away in 1965 at the age of 90, and his state funeral was a huge event, with world leaders coming together to honor him. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more of our contents.